Today in the EU, far-right election success pushes Germany towards political instability. The far right achieved one-third of the vote in East Germany's elections on Sunday. Now what? Parties on all sides of the political spectrum swore not to accept any agreement with Alternative for Germany, AfD, but the enforcement of a domestic cordon sanitaire could lead parties to shake hands on improbable coalitions, further stifling discontent among citizens. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. Today I'm talking to Berlin-based reporter Nick Alipour to examine Eastern Germany's history of far-right extremism and the country's uncertain political landscape following Sunday's vote. Hi, Nick.
Hello.
Let's start with the facts. On Sunday, the results of the elections in Eastern Germany confirmed polls' predictions, with the far-right Alternative for Germany scoring overwhelmingly positive results. Could you give us a recap of the figures?
Yes, that's actually very quick because the one headline you have to remember is that this is the first time since World War II that the far right in Germany has won a nationally significant election. It was two regional elections in Eastern Germany, but it was a nationally significant election. They won in Thuringia and they came second in Saxony, both with results over 30%. At a, in fact, large gap to the second place in Thuringia. So really, in many ways, performed a lot better than expected in that state. And the other important thing, obviously, the centrist parties of the national government have scored very, very badly.
Mm-hmm. And what has been the reaction across Europe to these results?
That was an interesting thing because I feel like on the ground in Germany, everyone had seen this coming. You know, we've been prepared for it for weeks. So when it happened, it was sort of a fatalist attitude. So everyone obviously was very shocked. But the true shock, the real outrage, that was what came from the rest of Europe. You know, I was following the elections on Sunday night. My phone blew up with push notifications from international media, from the New York Times to Le Monde, to everywhere around the world, to the Times of London, about the far right returning
Mm-hmm.
in Germany. And I think in Europe that hadn't been so present to that extent. But I think to the European and the world, foreign states, that was a very shocking result. From the political side, you know, it's all been a bit muted. Governments would obviously not comment on any such results.
Mm-hmm.
But we have some people, obviously partisans mostly of the left, that have commented nevertheless. They're not in government. And it is similar in terms of shock. Manon Aubry, one of the leading figures of the French left, La France Insoumise, the hard left in France, who spoke to us, said,
anytime that the left is cheating, betraying on its values, on its ambitions, it is installing the far right. And this is true in Germany. I think this is a lesson because anytime that the left stays strong in its values, strong in its ambitions, actually we defeat the far right. This is true in France and this is true in Spain.
So in a way, we're hearing a voice of polarization here again from abroad. The far right is winning, so you have to go all the way to the left to defeat them. I thought that was a very interesting reaction.
Nick, as you correctly pointed out, some are saying that the far right has returned to Germany, but the argument could be made that it never left, especially its eastern side. Even the country's top federal intelligence agency has classified the Thuringia branch of the AfD as a particularly extremist one, as a recognized far right extremist group. How much does ideology matter to our understanding of these results?
I think what has to be unpacked is perhaps the historical continuity of what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
The AfD is by no means equal to the NSDAP, you know, the former Nazi party from World War II. And for a long time, you know, Germany is in essence, in its structure, somewhat of a conservative country. It is a very homogenous country, ethnically homogenous. So any kind of deviation from the norm sort of is frowned upon. But it has, after World War II, not been overwhelmingly, for most of the times, a far-right country. That is very different. In fact, Germany has long been a country where anti-fascism and sort of awareness of the past has played such a big role that far-right thoughts, far-right parties could not take a foothold anywhere in German politics. In that sense, I think it is accurate to say that the far right is making a comeback, following the European trend, by the way. Germany is not leading this. We've had this in the Netherlands, in Italy, in France, in Sweden.
Hmm.
In that sense, we are just seeing Germany following the European trend and Germany not being spared. I think that is the important understanding one has to have of what is happening in Germany at the moment, that even in Germany, the far right has now sort of become acceptable to vote for.
And particularly looking at Thuringia and Saxony, where figures point out that far right extremism and politically driven violent crimes are on the rise more than in other places in the country, right?
That is correct. There are figures from this year by the umbrella organization of the police, which show that of the 5 German states where there was most far right crime or far right motivated crime, 3 of them are Eastern German. And Eastern Germany, that's important to bear in mind, makes up less than 20% of the German population overall. Yet they were among the states with the highest number of criminal incidents related to the far right. That is quite telling. And I think that's why over the last weeks, we had the usual media circus of like trying to find out why is it that Eastern Germany has this far right problem. And I think it is a question that there is not yet a satisfactory answer to, as there's still not one in other countries like the US or the UK or
Hmm.
elsewhere, why that is happening.
Yes, and we keep trying to at least understand why the AFD won this specific election. The party was born in 2013 mainly as a single issue party against the euro. Of course, in 11 years, the party has branched out and included a series of current issues to its political agenda, including the war in Ukraine. How important was and is the prospect of war for German citizens?
It was a question that parties such as the AfD, but also on the populist left, the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, Alliance Sarah Wagenknecht, BSW, have emphasized a lot during the campaign. But if we look at the motivations of voters, why they have voted for the respective parties,
Hmm.
the matter of war hasn't played that much of a role, but it's undeniable that it is something where the Eastern German states are very different.
Hmm.
We see here that the support for Ukraine's for sort of weapon deliveries to Ukraine is much lower than in the West. There's much more support for a weapons down, talks first kind of attitude in foreign policy. So that is definitely a difference. What is most important is that BSW, the populist left, has capitalized on this specific sentiment in the East, and they don't want to lose their brand. So in any kind of like talks about forming regional governments now, this will actually be one of the important demands to have a more dovish attitude on Ukraine and Russia. And we will see how that influences Germany's national stance on the matter.
It's really interesting what you say because when we look at this new anti establishment party, BSW, I mean, the group did not exist a year ago, and now it got a very impressive achievement. Do you think that that's the secret of its success?
It is indeed a phenomenal story, and it's something that's unprecedented in Germany's political history. Even the AfD, which took about 5 to 6 years to establish itself on the political scene in Germany, even that one did not take less than a year to come on. Certainly, the topical matter of war has helped that. It was just so present during the EU elections, where BSW also did very well.
Hmm.
It's a second thing is definitely that Sarah Wagenknecht, the leader and founder of the party, is not a new figure on the political scene.
Hmm.
She is very popular, at least with certain people, and she stands for this kind of war issue. So that has certainly helped her personal popularity. And the third is there's just currently a gap because the former far left, hard left party, Die Linke, sort of been in decline. And the people who used to vote Die Linke, by the way, that is the successor party to the former socialist leading party in Germany's East when it was still dictatorship. Those sort of like old left people, often former communists, they didn't really have the Linke to vote for anymore. And BSW represents more of a choice that is closer to their values, to their sort of old left values.
Hmm.
So it just took a spot that was empty. Those factors probably contributed overall.
Yes, and if we look at this election, the three leading parties are respectively AfD, center right CDU, and left conservative BSW. At this point, understanding what type of coalition will head state government is less than obvious. Could you explain why?
There are two states. In Thuringia, we're looking at crazy majorities because we have basically the alignment with the hard right, the hard left, another hard left party, the center right, a tiny center left faction, and the other establishment parties, the Greens and the Liberal FDP, have been eliminated. And the only viable majority there is a coalition between the center right CDU and the far left BSW and the far left Linke. So it has to be a coalition between the center right and the far left. And at the moment, the CDU also has a sort of like incompatibility attitude towards one of the far left parties. So it's all very complicated. We might see some form of minority government. Point is, there's no stable majority at all. In Saxony, it's a bit easier than that, but also there we will have to have the CDU, which won the election, coalesce with the populist left, the BSW, to form a stable government. So even by German standards, where we're used to coalition governments, this is an unprecedented situation and requires an extreme amount of ideological flexibility for all parties involved.
And ideological flexibility is not necessarily something that voters will appreciate.
Indeed, that is the big concern, and it's something the AfD has been capitalizing on as well. The AfD obviously won in Thuringia. They still say they want to lead a new government. And at the press conference that sort of happened after the election to discuss the election, the AfD leadership was saying exactly that. If the established parties continue to coalesce in crazy, ideologically weird coalitions just to keep the far right out, we will soon have an absolute majority in Germany for the far right. Now, I don't know about all that, but they have a point in that the current ideologically stretched national coalition is not doing very well and it has benefited the far right.
And so, looking if on the short term, these regional elections do not have a major impact on the current government, they could have one on the longer term. What political risks are there for the government coalition?
Yes, that is to be seen. I think in the midterm, what we do have is in Germany, the regional states where we had the elections, they are important because of the federal system in Germany to govern large parts of the country, to govern the region. They have competences, they have a lot of power. And if there's an unstable government in those states, that means this large parts of the country become unstable as well in some way. They also have votes at the national level on some legislation that could then go to relatively weird coalitions. Let's see what comes out of that. I guess the long term impact on national politics remains to be seen, though. First reactions show that people are a bit helpless. They don't know how to combat the rise of the far right. The Green leader said something like, you've heard it so many times before that we will now change our politics after far right victories. I'm not going to repeat that again because it's not going to help anything. They don't know what to do. And so far, the trend seems to be in the messaging, which the CDU has taken up to become even more radical on migration, or hardline rather, on migration, as the far right is. To also, and that is perhaps an interesting development, though tone down the hawkish hardline talk on Russia in the Ukraine war, because they need to coalesce with parties that are more dovish. So we will see how this plays to the support of Germany for Ukraine.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
I'm Giada Santana, and this was Euractivist Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractivist to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. It will really help us spread the word about our work. This episode was produced by Miriam Sanz de Tejada and I. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.